Hey everyone, looking forward to being with you this evening. My apologies that we're starting a couple minutes late. Just wanted to make sure we had everything set up and ready to go for this evening. Just a quick mic check. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, awesome. Well, as you guys probably already know, this is for the iOS prep course, or the intro to iOS, I guess I should say. And so throughout this course, we're going to be covering the basics of iOS as well as the basics of Swift, which is the main programming language that we use for iOS development. So if you're not here for iOS, you might want to try and double check your link to make sure you get to the right place, because I know there are a few other courses that are starting tonight for like data science and web development and Android development. But if you are here, then I am happy to have you and excited to work with you because iOS development is a lot of fun. So by way of introduction, my name is Johnny Hicks. By day, I work as a software engineer or an iOS engineer for an application called Day One. Day One is a journaling app, and people probably think it's weird. People usually think it's weird when I tell them that I work for Day One, because they usually don't know what it is and they wonder how a journaling app can make money, but it does. And it's a pretty successful app, been featured on the App Store a number of times, has earned an Apple Design Award and lots of other awards. So it's been really fun to work at Day One, and I have learned a lot there, and I'm excited to share some of the things that I've learned as we go throughout this course and learn how to become iOS developers. So there are probably a couple of different types of people here. Some of you may be here to kind of test the waters and see if iOS development is something that interests you, which is great. Some of you may be taking the Lambda School full-time course, and you need to take this course in order to kind of prepare and take the challenge exam for it, which is also great. So no matter the reason you're here, we're happy to have you. Now, let me just talk a little bit about Lambda School for those of you that don't know. So I work as a contractor for Lambda, but what they are doing is awesome. They are pretty similar to a lot of boot camps, but they are even better because of a few things. So number one, they've got amazing instructors. I actually learned to become a developer from a lot of the instructors that are at Lambda now. And so I would highly recommend all of them. Lambda is also awesome because it's all online. A lot of the boot camps you have to actually go to like a campus, or it's a really intense environment, whereas Lambda School, you can do it all online. It's a 6-month program, full-time, but they'll get you up and running and ready to become a developer within 6 months, which is awesome because a computer science degree takes 4 years or more and costs thousands and thousands of dollars, whereas you can do Lambda, which takes 6 months. And one of the best parts about it is that you don't have to pay a dime for it until you actually get a job as an engineer working in technology. So I think that's one of the best perks of Lambda is being able to forego paying that tuition up front, actually learning and developing the skill, and then thereafter starting to pay things back once you actually have a job and once Lambda School is starting to pay off. So for those of you that are interested in the Lambda course, you can always apply online on Lambda School's website. And if you have any questions about the full-time course, feel free to ask them here or to send me a personal Slack, and I'd be happy to talk about it. Okay? So a few other kind of housekeeping items that I want to cover. So this course, we're going to have it Monday through Thursday for the next 2 weeks. I'll get back to you on next week because next Monday is Labor Day, and So I'll see what we'll do. I don't know if we want to move it to like Tuesday to Friday, or I can send you like a previously recorded lecture and we can all just meet back up again on Tuesday. Maybe in tomorrow's class, I'll send out a poll to see what would work best for everyone here, what you'd prefer. Because I'm happy to do whatever. So I'll send out a poll tomorrow to see what's best. Okay. So again, this is a 2-week course. As far as how we can kind of stay in contact and whatnot, the Zoom chat here will be open after our lecture if you have any questions or if you guys want to communicate together. You also should have received some sort of link or invitation to use Slack. And so I'll go through Slack really quick just because I know that it's a new technology and you may not understand how to navigate it. But I'll talk about Slack. Again, it's not required for this course. You can do all of the kind of messaging and whatnot inside of the Zoom chat. But Slack can be nice for in-between courses. And you can also send direct messages to me or to any of your project managers. Okay, so let me go ahead and before we get started with anything today, I want to have you all fill out an attendance form. And so this attendance form is just to help us kind of see who's coming to the course. But we're also going to use it in order to put you in groups after our lecture today, okay? So normally how these days are going to work is that we're going to have a lecture from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and this is Pacific Standard Time. And then from 6 till about 6:45, you're going to be working on some sort of homework assignment or project that will kind of help reinforce what we learned during the lecture. And then from 6:45 on, you're going to be meeting in small groups with the project manager. And the project manager will kind of run you through the homework and answer any other specific questions. But I definitely recommend that you go to the small group meetings because that's where a lot of the learning is going to happen. I'll do my best to help with individual needs, but it's a little bit harder on this front. Whereas the smaller groups is where you're going to get the more one-on-one help that you need. Okay, so let me go ahead and let me show you what the attendance form is going to look like, and then I will send you a link and give you a couple minutes to fill it out. Okay, so let me send this link to you now on Zoom. Where did the Zoom chat go? Here it is. Okay, so I just sent the attendance link there in the Zoom chat if you want to click on that, and when you open it, you should see this first day attendance form. Okay, so what we need is for you to fill out your first name, your last name, your email address, and then this one may be a little bit harder, but which course are you starting today? If you click on the add button here, you'll see a long list of courses. You're going to scroll down to the bottom and click on iOS MVC 0827. Okay, 0827. So let me go ahead and circle that for you here. So iOS MVC 0827. That's going to be the course that you're in. Okay. So everyone go ahead and take about 2 minutes just to fill all that out. And again, the reason we need that is so that we can assign you into your groups after our lecture today. Okay. And okay. Is that link working for everyone okay? Okay. All right. Yeah, some of you may be looking for a Slack ID. If you can't find it, it's not a huge deal. I don't think you need to have it in order to submit. I think it's an optional field. Okay, so speaking of Slack, let me go through Slack with you guys really quick, just because I feel like it can be a useful tool throughout this course. But again, you don't have to. If you don't want to learn how to use it, then don't worry about it. But let me go through it with you really quick. Okay, so you should have received an invitation to Slack. This is what Slack looks like. I have the Slack application on my Mac here. It's also available on iOS. So if you need to use that, if you ever need to contact anybody, you can do that as well. So you should be a part of a couple of different channels, okay? So the main one for our course is iOS August 27th, okay? And so you can see here that we already have some conversations going on, some people that are trying to get into the Zoom, okay? And yeah, so this is what Slack looks like. You're going to go ahead and you can send messages in here, and those will go to our entire course. So you can see that we have 25 people that are inside of our course right now. So any messages that you send in here will be out to the entire group, okay? Now, if you want to send like a direct message to either me or to your project manager, you can go to direct messages here, and you can search for me. So my name is Johnny Hicks, and you'll see I'm right there, iOS instructor. Okay, and then one of the main project managers is Perez. Okay, so you can also search for Perez as well if you have any specific questions that you don't want to ask to the entire group. You can also, if you aren't assigned a project manager, like because you have to miss a day or whatnot and you need to send your homework assignment to someone, feel free to send it to me or to Perez, and we can look over those homework assignments for you, okay? So that is Slack in a nutshell, okay? So the iOS August 27th channel is our channel, okay? Let me see. I'm just looking over the chat, make sure that you guys aren't asking any questions that I need to cover. Okay. So yeah, let me know if you need to be added to this August 27th channel, just send me a direct message here. So go to direct messages, search Johnny Hicks, and let me know that you need to be added to the iOS August 27th. We try to add everyone that we can, but sometimes it's hard to make sure that we grab everyone. So, okay, I think, someone just asked, what are we entering our names for? That is for our attendance, okay? Just so that we can get a feel for everyone that's in the course, and then we can assign you out to your individual groups after lectures today, okay? All right, well that is enough housekeeping stuff. Let's get into the fun stuff. Okay, we're gonna actually build our first application, our first iOS application today. So for those of you who are in here, you should have downloaded Xcode to your computer, okay? We're going to be using Xcode every day, and if you want to be an iOS developer, you need to have Xcode, so make sure that you have it installed. For those of you that are here already and don't have it installed, go ahead and just listen for today, because Xcode is actually a pretty big application, and my guess is that you won't be able to install it in the time during our lecture today, okay? So I'm using Xcode 9.4 on my computer. Some of you may have downloaded Xcode 10. Xcode 10 is pretty stable right now, so that's okay. But sometimes you may run into bugs because Xcode 10 is still in beta. So I would recommend using Xcode 9.4 for now until Xcode 10 is officially released, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and let's get into it. So you should all be able to see my screen still. we're going to go ahead and launch Xcode. Okay, I already have it launched, so let me close it really quick, just so that we can see a fresh launch. Okay, so quick overview about what is Xcode. Xcode is what we call an integrated development environment, or an IDE. Okay, and so that's just a fancy way to say that Xcode pretty much does everything that you're going to need it to do to create an application, to run an application, to debug the application, and to push your application to the App Store. Okay, so pretty much everything that we do for iOS development lives inside of Xcode. Okay, obviously, like source control and whatnot is still done through GitHub, but even Xcode has a lot of source control features in it to push and to pull and to branch. And all of that probably doesn't mean much to you guys. But just know that Xcode is kind of the all-in-one package for creating an application, okay? So let's go ahead and we are going to get started today with a new Xcode project, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and lost my window there. Let's go ahead and I'm going to do File, New. We're going to get started with a new project. Okay, so if you clicked on Get Started with New Project, you should see this screen here. Okay, and let me just make sure that I turn my text to presentation so you guys can all see. Okay, so here we see a screen to choose a template. Choose an Xcode template. Okay. And throughout this course, we're just going to be using this single view app template. The single view app template is really just kind of the bare bones template to get started with an Xcode project. And so you may think single view app, well, what if I want to make an application that has multiple views? Because I know I thought that when I saw the template, that I was like, oh, single view app, I want to do more than that. Single view app is just the bare bones. You can add more views and whatnot. It just gives you the bare bones template that we need, okay? You'll see that there are other templates here for like games and augmented reality, iMessage app, and those will kind of give you some of the cookie cutter code that is pretty common in those types of applications, okay? But because we're gonna be making just kind of an app from the ground up, we just need to use single view app, okay? So let's go ahead and we're going to hit next here. And we need to give our application a name, okay? So our app today is going to be called Hello. Well, actually, no, let's call it Flashlight. We're going to make a Flashlight app today, okay? And I'm going to call it Flashlight Lambda School, okay? And then you'll see that there's a place to put in a team name. You're probably going to be choosing none because team names are going to show up if you've purchased like an Apple developer account, which you probably haven't if you're taking this course. So you can go ahead and set it to none, which is totally fine. I'm going to leave mine on Lambda. Organization name can be whatever you want it to be. Your organization identifier. You can see that it's reverse URL notation, so com.johnhicks. It just takes com and then adds my organization name. Okay, and then you have your bundle identifier, which generates from your organization identifier and your product name and combines them together. Okay, so that bundle identifier is important because that is how the App Store recognizes your application. And there can never be two of the same bundle identifier, okay? So sometimes when I'm creating a project, make sure that you don't copy all of the fields as I have them, which you probably don't if you have your own organization name and identifier. But make sure that your bundle identifier needs to be unique, okay? So make up your own organization name and then add the product name as well, okay? And then our primary language that we're gonna be using is Swift, okay? If you take the full-time course, you will learn a little bit about Objective-C, but for this Intro to iOS course, we are just going to be using Swift as our language, okay? So let's go ahead and we'll hit next here. And I'm just gonna save this on my desktop. And it's created. Okay. So let me go ahead and make this full screen for you guys. And is everybody caught up? Okay. Does everyone have, is everyone up to this point thus far? Very good. Okay. And I forgot to mention this, but Zoom actually has a cool feature, a Q&A feature to ask me specific questions. I think some of you have probably already tried asking me questions and I've missed them because you put them in the chat, which is totally fine. But a better way to ask questions throughout this lecture is by using the Q&A feature inside of Zoom. So you should see an option to ask a question in the Q&A. And that makes it a little bit easier for me to see your questions, and then I can mark them as answered as we go through them. So if you have any questions during the lecture today, please send them through the Q&A to make sure that I see them, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and let's kind of take a quick tour of Xcode, okay? So over here to the left, we have our project navigator, okay? And this is a list of all of the different files that are inside of our Xcode project, okay? So you can see that we've already been provided a few different files. Now, a lot of these files are just kind of necessary for launching your application and for publishing it to the App Store. So a lot of cookie cutter files that are just needed for kind of administrative purposes, okay? And we'll talk about how to add more files and to change files and whatnot, but this is our project navigator where we kind of go through each of our different files, okay? So you can see right here, we're just kind of on a screen of an overview of our project. You can see this is where you set up like the version number for your application, where you can set up what devices your application supports, even what device orientation. You can make it so your application works in landscape mode and portrait mode. So this is a lot of the more general stuff for your application, okay? If I click on the viewcontroller.swift file, you'll see that we get a little bit of code that is provided for us. And then we also have our main.storyboard file, which you can see is kind of a blank canvas here with, that sort of looks like an iPhone screen, right? It's got your battery indicator and your time and whatnot, okay? So those are the two main files that we're going to be working with today. Our viewcontroller.swift file, which is kind of the code that we're going to be running. And then this main.storyboard is maybe something that you haven't heard about, what you haven't heard of when it comes to iOS development. But Interface Builder is awesome because it allows us to set up the interface for our application without using code to set it up programmatically, right? So I can set up where buttons appear, I can set up different labels and different switches and whatnot, all right here on this canvas. And it's as simple as using if you've ever used Keynote or if you've used Photoshop, it's pretty similar in how you can kind of drag elements onto it, move it around, set up constraints and whatnot. And so this is what we're going to be using today to set up our first application, okay? So today we're making a flashlight app, right? And this application is going to have one button on it, okay? Initially, it's going to have one button, and when the user taps on that button, it's going to change the color of the background of the screen, okay? It's going to change the color of the background of the screen. So let's go ahead and let's set up a button. Let's put a button onto our canvas here, okay? So make sure that you are on the main.storyboard file, okay? And I'm going to go ahead here, and down here at the bottom right of Xcode, you should see a drawer that is full of interface objects, okay? So these are different objects that we can drag onto our storyboard. So if you scroll down, you'll see things that you've probably seen in every application, right? You've got switches here, you've got text fields, you've got sliders, you've got buttons, labels, all these different elements that you can drag onto this storyboard here. okay? Well, like I said, we want to set up a button, right? So go ahead and look for button on the list. It should be pretty close to the top. We've got button. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to click on the button and we're going to drag it over onto our storyboard, okay? And so you'll know that you've dragged it to a usable view when it highlights blue, okay? So drag it over to the storyboard and it highlights blue. And if you drag it around, you'll see that we get some guidelines to show us kind of the center axis of our storyboard here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and drag my button to the very center. Okay, and then go ahead and let go of the click, and you should see a button on your canvas now. Okay, well, this is a button, and it says button, which isn't very useful. So let's go ahead and let's change the title for it. Okay, so the way you can change the title for the button is if you double click on it, it should highlight blue and allow you to change what it says. Okay, so I'm going to set this to say hello world for right now. Okay, so we've got our button here, and we can see that the button is in the center of my screen, right? Well, currently I am viewing this application as an iPhone 8. Okay, so all of these dimensions that we see for the storyboard are the dimensions for an iPhone 8. But Apple always comes out with new products with new dimensions and new sizes, and maybe we want to see what our application looks like on those different sizes, okay? So you can actually see down here at the bottom, there's a button that says View As, and then a certain device. Mine says iPhone 8, okay? Well, if you click on that, it will give you options to select a different device, a different way to view your screen or your application, right? So I can view this as an SE or as an iPhone 10 or as an iPad. You can see that as I'm changing the device that I'm viewing this on, that my button has moved from the center, okay? And this is because our button that we have put on the screen does not have any constraints, right? So when we dragged it into our storyboard, we placed it in the center of an iPhone 8, and if we look at an iPhone 8, or what was I on? There we go. If I look at the iPhone 8, you can see that it's still in the center. But as I change different devices, the screen size of those devices is different, and so Xcode doesn't know where to place the button for that specific screen size, okay? So this is where constraints come in, okay? So constraints are things that we can add to different UI elements in our application to make sure that they are always in a predictable location, no matter the screen size, okay? So let's go ahead and let's add some constraints to this button, okay? And I want to center this button on any screen that my application is used on. Okay, so the way that we can add constraints is if you go down here to the right, the bottom right, you'll see these 4 different buttons, or I guess 5 different buttons. And there's one that kind of looks like a column, like a bar graph, okay? And if you hover over it, it says the word align, okay? So this is the button that we use to add alignment constraints, okay? And so I know that I want to align my button to the center of my screen, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and click on that. And you'll see that the name of this menu says Add New Alignment Constraints, okay? So I want to center my button horizontally and vertically inside of my container, okay? So I'm actually going to go ahead and check both of these boxes here where it says horizontally in container and vertically in container. And then I'm going to click on Add to Constraints, okay? So you can see as soon as I did that, now I've got lines that are showing me that my button is constrained to the very center of my screen, okay? And it's going to be constrained to the center of the screen no matter the device. So now you can see if I toggle between the different View As options, that button is always in the center, even on an iPad, right? Okay. So constraints are super important in development, right? Unless you're unless you're only providing an application for a specific device, you wouldn't necessarily need constraints. But that's not a common use case, right? Because all of us have different phones and whatnot. So learning to use constraints to set up these UI elements is super important, so that your button or whatever you put on the screen is always in a predictable location, okay? So in this case, it's just going to be in the center of our screen. Okay. Is everyone with me thus far? Was everyone able to get those constraints added? Okay. So I had one question come through that said that the add constraints stayed grayed out, that you weren't able to select constraints. Okay, and that's pretty common issue, especially when you get lots of different objects and whatnot on your storyboard. If you're not selected on the button, then you may not be able to add constraints, right? So let's say, for example, that I was selected on my view, okay? And you can see that we have like a view navigation hierarchy here. So if you were selected on the view and you tried to add some constraints, it probably wasn't going to let you, okay? Or if you're selected on some other weird element, right? So make sure that you are selected on your button here, and then select the alignment constraint button and select horizontally and vertically in container, okay? Okay. And then I had another question come through that you accidentally moved it, tried to realign, and it added 2 more constraints for a total of 4, okay? So it shouldn't have added any constraints. You can see if I move this, that it kind of puts it off, right? It says, hey, you put the button somewhere, but you told me to constrain it in a different location. If that ever happens, you can reset the view to its constraints by clicking on this update frames button. I believe should put it back in its place, okay? So just click update frames, okay? So if I drag this outside of its constraints, hit update frames here, which kind of looks like this little refresh button, and that should put it back to where it's supposed to be, okay? All right. Okay, so we've got a button here, but right now the button isn't set up to do anything, right? Well, let me talk a little bit about what's called the attribute inspector, okay? So the attribute inspector is what allows us to add more customization to these visual interface elements, okay? So if I'm clicked on my button here, and I go up to these top menus, you'll see that there are 6 buttons, and these are called our inspectors. These are our inspector menus, okay? And so we have an identity inspector here. We have a size inspector, okay? And this is a place where you can view the different constraints that are on your objects. Okay, so if I'm selected on my button, you can see that my button has 2 constraints. And so that's a lot of like the sizing stuff, okay? But if I click on this attributes inspector, which kind of looks like a down arrow, this will give you more options to customize your button here. Okay, you can see that I can actually set up my title here. So right now it's set to hello world, but I could change that to flashlight or something like that, right? Flashlighty, even flashlighty, right? Flashlight. Okay, so that's where I could change the title of my button. If I needed to, I'll change it back to hello world for now. Okay, you can change the font for the button. You can change the text color, the shadow color. You can even add images to buttons if you have like image assets inside of Xcode. You can change the alignment. So there's a lot of different things that we can change with our button, right? I'm going to go ahead and just leave the button as is for simplicity's sake, but you can feel free to change like the font size or the text color. You can even change like the background color here if you want to make it look more like a button if you want. But I'm going to leave mine just as a plain hello world. Okay. So now this button doesn't do anything right now, and that's because we don't have any code associated with it. Okay. if I were to run it on my simulator right now, or to run it on a device, I could still tap on it and I could see that it was being selected by it like sort of disappearing or highlighting differently. So it's selecting, but there's no code set up to actually run with it, okay? So let's go ahead and let's talk about how we can do that, okay? So this storyboard right here, all of this interface is connected to our view controller.swift file here, okay? So my main.storyboard is connected to my view controller. So one is kind of the visual part of it, and the other part is the programmatic part of my application, okay? And I want to be able to interact with both of them as my user does things throughout my application, right? So first question is then, how do we make sure that my view controller knows about my button and knows about when a user taps on the button? Okay, so let's go ahead and let's connect my button to this code now, okay? And we can do that by creating what's called an outlet, okay? So an outlet gives us kind of access to that button, okay? So the way that we create an outlet is we need to have our storyboard, our main.storyboard, and our view controller .swift file side by side, okay? So the way that we can open up multiple views or multiple files inside of Xcode is by opening up the assistant editor, okay? So if you go up to the top right, there's a little button that looks like Olympic rings, 2 Olympic rings together. That is the assistant editor. So go ahead and click on that, and you'll see that it opens up a right side here. So now I've got kind of my 2 screens next to each other. But I want to actually change the file that I have over here, right? Because you can see that this is just showing me a duplicate of viewcontroller.swift, okay? So I want to open up my main.storyboard over here on the right, okay? So the way that I can do that is Xcode, when you open up the assistant editor, it will usually try to guess what storyboard or what file you want to open up in that new editor. But sometimes it gets it wrong. In this case, it didn't pull up my storyboard. For some of you, it might have pulled up your storyboard. Maybe if I have my storyboard selected, it will, yeah, sweet. Yeah, so if you go ahead and you select your main.storyboard in your project navigator, then you should see now that your viewcontroller.swift file is in the other panel, okay? So you should have both of these up, your main.storyboard and your viewcontroller.swift file. Is everyone with me thus far? I don't want anyone to get left behind. Perfect. You guys are doing great. Okay. So, like I said, we need to create an outlet to my button. Okay, so if you think of an outlet, like you have outlets to plug in lamps, an outlet allows us to kind of plug into that visual interface element, okay? So in order to create an outlet, I'm going to have my Hello World button selected, okay? Then you're gonna hold down Control, the Control key, click from your button and drag over to your viewcontroller.swift file. Okay, so you should see a line that's showing that you're dragging from your button, and then you can see that it gives me different locations of where I can place it. Okay, as long as it's somewhere in between line 11 and line 24, which are the opening and closing braces of this view controller class. Okay, and don't worry so much about what is a class or whatnot, but it needs to be somewhere within the opening and closing braces. Okay. And it also can't be inside the braces of either of these functions, okay? So usually when I create outlets, I like to put them at the top. So go ahead and drop that connection there, and then you'll see that we get a new menu here that allows us to create our connection, okay? So we are creating an outlet here, and I'm going to give it a name, okay? And let's go ahead and give this button name, we'll call it Hello World button, okay? And so one quick thing I want to note is when you're creating buttons inside of an application, be sure to give them a really good name, okay? Because if I'm a new developer and I'm looking at your code and all I see is you labeled a button as button, or you labeled the outlet as button, I'm not really going to know what that button does, okay? So make sure that you give your button like a good name, that it's really clear what it does, okay? In this case, I'm going to call this my Hello World button because it's my button that's going to say Hello World. Eventually it will work as a flashlight, okay? So the type here is going to be UI button. So make sure you have UI button as the type. And don't worry about the storage. Okay, there's either weak or strong. Go ahead and leave it as weak. Or if it's already strong, you can leave it as strong. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit connect here. And now you'll see that inside of our code, we have an outlet for our Hello World button, okay? So the outlet, again, allows me to kind of plug in to my button. And when I can plug into it, I can change different things with it, right? So I can make programmatic changes here in my view controller for my button, okay? So let's take a look at this view controller code real quick. Okay, so we can see that we've got this view did load. Okay, this is just code that's going to be run. Anything that falls in between these braces of the view did load, this brace here and this brace, that's going to be code that is run as soon as the view appears, right? So view did load. So after the view loads, what do you want me to do? Okay, that's going to be all the code that's in here. Okay. And then go ahead and you can get rid of this did receive memory warning stuff because we're not doing anything that's going to be like really memory heavy. So we don't need to worry about that warning there. Okay, so you should on your view controller have an outlet to your Hello World button and your view did load function. Okay, did everybody get the outlet okay? Any questions about how to create an outlet? Okay. Had someone ask, will you be able to rewatch the lessons? Yes, you will be able to. The lessons are usually posted a couple of hours after class. Okay. All right. So everybody's got their outlet, which is perfect. Okay. So let me just give you a quick example of how we can access or make programmatic changes with outlets. Okay. Well, let's say that my Hello World button on my storyboard, it says Hello World. But when it actually runs, I want it to say something else. I want to like reset the title to something else. Okay. Let's say I have an application. This is a flashlight app that's going to be used in like 50 different languages. Well, I don't have a storyboard that's going to say Hello World for every language, right? Right. This just says Hello World in English. But maybe I want to set up like some sort of localized string so that whatever language your device is set to, it's going to kind of translate that and show different text, right? So I can set up programmatically what I want the text to say here in view did load because now I have an outlet to my Hello World button, okay? So in order to make changes to my Hello World button inside of view did load, in between these braces here, I could say self.hello world button. Okay, and if I put another dot, this gives me access to the different properties or attributes inside of my button that I can change, right? So maybe I want to set the title, okay? So here there's an option to set title, and maybe I want the title to be flashlight, and for control state, again, this is all just an example. Don't worry about what all of this means, right? But because I have this outlet here, it allows me to tap into that UI element and to make changes, right? So I wanted to set the title to be flashlight, okay? For control state normal, which again, don't worry about that. All right, so that's kind of what the purpose of outlets are, is that they allow us to tap into those visual interface elements and to change things, right? So, I could have like a let hello string equal, and then there's something called NS localized string here, which allows you to create strings for different languages, right? It localizes it according to the user's language, right? So then I could go ahead and I could throw that in as my title, right? So that's the importance of outlets, but I don't want you to get too hung up on that right now, okay? So I'm even just gonna actually get rid of this code to reset the title, okay? So let's talk about how we can actually make our button do something, okay? Because when we have the outlet, that kind of changes like what it looks like or what it says, but it doesn't have anything to do with when a user actually taps it, okay? And in order to kind of track that, we use what's called an IB action, okay? So go ahead and back over on your Hello World button, hold down Control and drag from your button again. And I like to put any actions or IB actions underneath this muted load, okay? Just to kind of keep the outlets and the actions separated, okay? So just like you created an outlet, go ahead and drag from the button back over to your viewcontroller.swift file. And for our connection type, instead of our connection type being an outlet, I want to set up an action, okay? If you don't see action as one of the menu items, it means that you didn't drag from the button, okay? You probably dragged from either one of the constraints or from the view, which it's easy, it happens. But make sure that you're dragging from your button over, and then you should see this option for action as your connection type, okay? So I need to give this action a name, and let's go ahead and say hello world button tapped is the name of my function, okay? And again, you want to be really clear with these names of what this actually does, right? What's the action that is taking place while the hello world button is being tapped, okay? So type, you can either have that set to any or UI button, either one. And then you'll see that there are these different event types. Touch up inside is the most common one, that when you touch the button and release, then it performs its action, right? But there are different things. There's, you know, touch drag enter, touch drag exit, touchdown. You know, like a touchdown would be like, it's not even on release. It's just like right when you touch it, right? But touch up inside is the most common one, okay? When you actually tap the button and release, then run this code, okay? So we want this to be a touch up inside event. And we're gonna connect. Okay, so now on my code, I've got an IB action for hello world button tapped, okay? And I like to put little spaces in between I like to press enter a couple times after the opening brace, because anything that's inside here will be the code that is run when the user taps the button, okay? So for simplicity's sake and to kind of test and make sure that everything is working up to this point, inside of your IB action here, go ahead and put print here and then say print hello world, okay? And any text that you want it to print out needs to be surrounded by double quotes. This is what we call a string. Okay, so go ahead and type in print hello world and put that inside of your IB action. Okay. All right, so go ahead then and let's run our code and see where we're at thus far. Okay, so the way that we can run our code is up in the top left, there is this play button here. Okay, and that is how we build and run our code. You can also change what device you're using as your simulator. If your device is connected to your computer, you can see your device up here, or Apple gives you access to all of the different device types if you want to use those simulators as well. Okay, so I'm going to test this on an iPhone 10, and we're going to hit the play button here. And this is probably your first time launching a simulator, so it might take a second or two to be up and running. Okay, so I can see on my screen that I've got a hello world button here, and it's centered on my device, which is perfect. Okay, And let's go ahead and see what happens when I tap on the button. Okay, so hello world. Okay, so nothing is actually happening visually, okay? But if you look back on Xcode here, inside of your debugger window or your console here, you can see that it is printing out the words hello world every time that I press it, right? So I can push it a million times. Hello world, okay? So that's what the print statement does, is it will print text down to this debugger window, okay? Well, that's not super useful for our application, right? This makes the app kind of boring, okay? So we want to change, let's change like a visual interface element with the tap of this button, okay? So here's how we can do it. Did anyone have any problems getting that to run, by the way? I might still be running, like it might still be loading on your computer, but is everyone good thus far? Still building. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and move forward, and if you have issues, let me know. But let's go ahead and let's take a look back at our file now, okay? So let's get rid of this print hello world stuff because we don't need it, it's boring. And like I said, we want to change the background color of our application when the user taps the button, right? So what I can do is, just like we were able to use our outlet to change different elements, like if I wanted to change what the hello world button said, you can actually write code to change the color of the background without needing an outlet, right? Because this view controller has a view built into it, okay? And the view that it has is just the full screen, okay? So if I wanted to change the color when the user tapped the button, I'm going to reference my view and say self.view, okay? And this is just the main view of our screen, okay? And then if I use dot notation here and type in color, you can see that I can change a few different things, right? Tint color, background color. Well, we want to change the background color, okay? So self.view.background color is equal to, and then I can change it to whatever color I want, okay? And so how do we access colors? Okay, well, I can't just say blue here or white, right? I need to access the colors inside of some sort of framework that has all of these colors, okay? Well, Apple has provided what's called UI color, which just has a palette of all the different colors that we may want to use, right? So I'm going to say that my background color is equal to UI color, and then using dot syntax, you'll see that I get a list of different colors. I've got cyan, dark gray, dark text, black, blue, brown, okay? Let's say that I want to change the color to, let's do yellow, okay? Flashlights can sometimes be yellow, right? So when the hello world button is tapped, I want to reset my view's background color to be yellow, okay? So I use UI color.yellow. Xcode actually already knows that background color is going to be of type UI color, so I can also just do dot yellow here. And it already knows that you want to use UI color, okay? So that's a nice little shortcut. But we could say UI color.yellow. All right, so let's go ahead and give it a shot. Go ahead and hit the play button. Okay. And when I press the button, I am expecting the background color of my application to change to yellow. Let's go ahead and do it. And there we go. Okay, so I clicked on the button and it changed the background color to yellow. Okay. Okay, did that work out for everybody? I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay, so for those of you that it did work for the last 5 minutes, I want you to create 2 more buttons. Okay, create 2 more buttons on your main.storyboard and create 2 more IB actions that are connected to those buttons. And I want those those buttons to change the background color to something different, right? So you could have one button that turns the background color to blue, one that changes it to yellow, one that changes it back to white, okay? So go ahead and take about 5 minutes or so to do that, and then I'll answer any questions if anybody needs to get caught up. But yeah, go ahead and take a couple minutes to do that. I actually don't think you guys need 5 minutes, so take 3 minutes, okay? So yeah, you don't need to create any outlets. I was just showing you what outlets are, but because we don't need to change anything about the buttons, we don't need outlets to them, right? We only need IB actions for them. Okay, so the assignment for the next 3 minutes is to add 2 more buttons, and each of those buttons needs to change the background color to a different color, okay? So right now I tap this button, it turns yellow, but I want another button that turns it blue or black, and then another button that turns it green, okay? So you're gonna have 3 buttons that all change the background color to a different color. And don't get too hung up on constraints, because you'll probably run the application and you'll see that your buttons are like in weird places. Don't worry about adding constraints, because sometimes it's hard to add, or I don't really want to go through adding constraints for multiple buttons. So go ahead and just drag those on and put them close to your current button that you have. Okay, so somebody just asked, what's the purpose of the IB outlets? I didn't use them today. I wanted to show you how to create one, but we're not actually using the outlet for anything. But you can use outlets to, like if I wanted to change the text on my button, or I wanted to change the background color of my button, I could do that here, right? So like for example, in the Day One app that I work on, we have like a light mode and a dark mode. The dark mode is for people that like to journal at night. And so you create outlets to all of the visual interface elements. And then inside of my code, I can say, okay, is dark mode on? If so, set all of the colors for these to this. Okay, if not, set all the color to this, right? So the IB outlet is important to give you access to those visual interface elements, right? Because on the main.storyboard, I can't give something 2 colors, right? I couldn't say this button is white and blue. I would need to set it programmatically and say, okay, I want it to be white in this case or black in this case. Okay, so that's the purpose of the IB outlets. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's run through it. Okay, so I want to add 2 more buttons. So let's go ahead and drag those buttons on to my storyboard here. So I've got button and button. I'm going to call this one black. And let's call this one blue, okay? And I need to create IB actions to both of those, right? So I'm going to control click and drag over, and I'm gonna name this. Make sure that you set the connection type to an action. It will default to outlet, but we want it to be an action, right? I'm gonna say black button tapped, okay? We'll connect that. And inside of that code, I want to set the background color of my view to be equal to black, right? Okay, and one more from blue. Drag it over, make its connection type. We'll say blue button tapped. Okay. And we'll drag over from our blue button here. Oh, sorry, we already did that. That was weird. Self.view.background color is equal to .blue. All right, so let's go ahead and run the code and see if it worked. Okay, so black works, yellow works, blue works. Awesome. Okay, so now we've got 3 buttons here that are setting the background color when I tap on it, right? Okay, guys, so that's all that we have for today. Hopefully everyone was caught up. You're gonna get some time to practice this with a project, okay? And with that being said, let me show you what the student portal looks like, okay? So you should have all filled out this first day attendance form, but I don't have it open. It should be here. Here it is. Okay, and I'll share this link with all of you. But this is the student portal that has access to all of the links and everything that you're going to need throughout the course, right? So you can see here that it's hyperlinked to our Zoom webinar. And it also gives you access to your homework, right? So you can see all of our different lectures here. We've got Intro to iOS, which we did today. These are all the things that we're going to be covering throughout the course. If you actually click into it, it gives you an option to prepare. You don't actually need to watch these because these are the lecture that we're going to go through. But if you are going to be missing a day and you need to watch the lecture, you can watch it here in the student portal. This is where you can kind of review the different things that we've talked about. And it's also where you can access the project for the day, okay? Which the project for today is our rainbow application, okay? And let me share the link with you guys here, okay? So I just shared the link to your homework. So this homework's probably going to be pretty easy, and that's why I was okay to run a little bit over today. But in about 30 minutes or so, Perez is going to open up a new Zoom for you guys to get into your smaller groups, okay? So make sure that you stick around for those meetings so that you guys can talk and ask specific questions. And as soon as you finish your homework, fill out the daily stand-up form, okay? This is a good place for us to get a feel of where you are in the course, how you're feeling about the content, and also give me feedback, okay? If I'm not doing a good job teaching, I want to know about it so that I can get better and so that we can make this class helpful for you guys, okay? So please fill out these daily stand-up forms as soon as you finish the homework assignment, just so that we can get a good measure of how you're feeling, okay? So that's all that we have for tonight. I'm going to post all of these links inside of Zoom. The link to the student portal and the link to the stand-up and whatnot. I'm also going to post it all to Slack, okay? So feel free to work inside of Slack as well as inside the Zoom chat if you guys need to talk with each other. But tomorrow we're going to be talking about an introduction to Swift, and we're going to start learning the Swift language, okay? You will be assigned a project manager in about 30 to 45 minutes. That's what Perez is going to do. He's going to assign you a project manager, and you will send your projects to your project manager for them to look over and correct, okay? All right, so that's all we have for tonight. I'm so excited for this class, guys. This is going to be a lot of fun. You guys did awesome keeping up today. Any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to me or to Perez or to your project manager or to your classmates who are also learning along with you, okay? Because we can all learn from one another, okay? So you guys have a great night. I'll share these links, and we will see you all back here tomorrow. You guys have a great night.